Okay, so we're going to go over joint placement today. We went over a lot of the theory of it last class period. So if you didn't catch that or you weren't here, then you'll probably want to talk to one of your fellow students to recover that information. And today we're going to talk about the tools to enable you to do that in Maya. So the first thing you're going to want to do is, besides load your file, you want to go to your menu settings and change it up here at the top left and change it to the animation menu set. With that, you'll have this animate, geometry cache, create deformers, edit deformers, skeleton, skin, constraint, character. You'll have that menu. So now to place joints, what you want to do first is first of all, you want to go to an orthographic view. Okay, so this is my orthographic front view. This is where I like to start. If you wanted to, you could start in the side view as well. But if you go to the skeleton menu, joint tool, then you can start placing joints. If you click on this little icon here, it will turn on X-ray joints so that you can actually see through the mesh the bones that you're creating. So I'm going to turn on the grid to make sure I'm perfectly in the center. And actually, before I do this, I want to make sure that my model is perfectly in the center. So I'm going to select all of it. Press Ctrl-G to group it. And then I'm going to rest these feet right down on that thick line. That's my ground plane. My shoelaces are going berserk, but I'm not really that concerned about it right now. Okay. Now also, if you're working toward the game, you would not want to do this, but any other reason, you would actually want to create this, you would want to reference this file in. So let's go ahead and do it the right way. So I'm going to delete this image, or I'm not going to delete it, I'm just going to hide it for now. I'm going to hide the image plane. So we go to Show Image Planes and turn that off. And then I'm going to save this at this location. Do a save as, because I don't want to actually save over this file. 2. Okay, and now it's feet are on the ground plane. Then I'm going to open a new file. And then the first thing I'm going to do is create a reference. Or just go to the reference editor and click on this diamond with the plus sign. That's a create reference. And I'm going to reference in this girl model 2. Okay. So now the whole point of doing that is so that if, as I make updates, which obviously I need to, since she doesn't even have a face yet, anytime I make an update, it's going to the model file, it's going to automatically update my rig file with that new model. Because it's just looking at that file to see what information it needs to include in this file. Okay, so with that done, I can go back to my front view and go to my joint tool again, and I can start placing joints. And turn on the X-ray joints. And first thing that you'll want to place is the spine. And there's her waist, so I'm going to snap it right there. And you see how it's not quite on X? I want to zero that out. And I'm going to go ahead and call this hips. underscore JNT for joint. And that's my beginning joint. Now the first thing you want to do is move up the spine. On a cartoon character, you won't need a ton of these, and the joints typically on a cartoon character are going to go straight up the middle, that's obvious from the front, but they're also going to go straight up the middle from the side, and not the middle of the scene, but the center of the torso of the character. So I'm going to draw them in this view first. And then, okay, so if I hold down Shift, I can add in another joint here, here, and do one there. Okay, and that's about where her clavicles are. But now I need to make sure there's one there so the clavicles can come off of that location. Then I need to do at the bottom of the neck, probably a midpoint on the neck, and the top of the neck. And that's kind of a shot in the dark since she doesn't even have a head yet. Okay, now I can do what's called pick walking, and I can pick walk, and I can press up on my keyboard, and it's going to go move up in the hierarchy. And the best way to see what's going on there is by open up this hypergraph hierarchy. If I press up, it moves up in the hierarchy. If I press down, it moves down in the hierarchy. Okay, so I'm going to go to that shoulders joint. I'm going to go ahead and rename it. If I control double click on it, it'll let me rename it. Shoulders underscore joint. And this is going to be mid torso or torso mid joint. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do some renaming, I guess. And I think I'm going to do without this joint, actually. So to rearrange my hierarchy, all I have to do is middle mouse click on a node, and I can drag it to the node that I want it to be a parent of. Okay, then I'm going to get rid of this joint 3. Decided I don't need it. And then I'm going to rename this one to neck underscore base underscore joint. This is going to be neck mid joint. And then we'll do head base joint. It's important to name all these because you're going to end up with quite a few joints in the body. So you can represent the entirety of the skeleton. Okay, so now from the shoulders joint, I need to have clavicles come off of that so I can go out and put bones in each arm. So by selecting the shoulders joint, and I still have my joint tool activated, I'm going to click about where the pivot point is of the clavicle. So I guess it's about right there. And then the next one is going to be about where I think the shoulder should be. Guessing about right there. And now I want to make sure these are perfectly straight. So if I hold down the Shift key, and before I do that, I want to turn on my grid so I can see my mesh. My mesh is an indicator of where I want the elbow to be at. So I put a little extra geometry where I want the elbow. So I'm going to hold down Shift and click about where I want the elbow. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the wrist. Shift and click. Now, that's not quite where I want it, right? Because the wrist, that's too high on the wrist. So what I need to do, because the other problem that I have is that I need this joint chain to be perfectly straight. Okay? And not necessarily straight out, but they all need to be perfectly in line with each other. So we can get around this here in a second. But first of all, what I need to do is I need to move this, what will be an elbow joint. I need to move it straight back. So I'm going to go to the top view, turn on X-ray joints, and I need to put a little crook in the arm. Okay. Now, it looks like I need to move the shoulder joint first. So I'm going to move that back to the center of the arm. Turn on X-ray mode, make sure it's really in the center of the mass. Okay. So I move that back, but there's still no crook in the arm. We need to bend it, create a little bit of a crook. Okay, so if I hold down D on my keyboard or press insert, then I can move this joint without moving its children. And I just need to move it ever so slightly so that this is bent. Now, when I do that, it's going to make it so the IK handle, the inverse kinematics handle that we'll create later on, will function properly. Okay, so now I've got a little bit of a crook in there, and I got the shoulders placed where it needs to be, front to back, but not top to bottom. But it is placed in and out where it should be. So let me switch back to my front view, and I need to be able to get the wrist down where it belongs. So using this shoulder joint, I'm going to go to my rotate tool, and I'm going to rotate this down so that it makes sense in this with my geometry. If I don't have enough precision, you can press the up arrow, or the plus, not the up arrow. You can press the equals key or the plus key to increase your manipulator size, and that'll give you a little bit more control. Okay, so now everything's in line where it needs to be. So I'm going to decrease my manipulator back to the regular size. But now there's a problem with this setup, and that is that joints, you cannot, or you should not anyway, have any rotation on any of your joints that you're going to use for your skeleton. And I just put some rotation on there. So what I need to do instead is I need to use these joints as reference and create the actual joints that I really want. So I'm going to go back to my joint tool. I'm going to hide my mesh this time. So go to the show menu, hide polygons, and I'm going to click on the shoulders joint, select it, and then I'm going to hold down V so I can snap to vertices, so I can snap to the center of each of these joints. Okay, now I created a new set of joints that are in the exact same location as the previous joints, except these joints will not have any rotations on them. They'll have translate only, which is just what we wanted. So if you were to look over in my channel box, you would see that. Okay, so now that I've got that done, I can go ahead and delete this first set that I just used as reference. And I'm going to go ahead and rename these. So we'll call this clav or clavicle underscore, and this is on the left side. So I'm going to say underscore L underscore joint. And rename this one to shoulder underscore L underscore joint. Elbow underscore L for left side underscore joint. And we got wrist underscore L underscore joint. Okay. Now I'm going to create another joint from this wrist joint. I'm just going to duplicate it. You don't have to do it this way. I'm just showing you that it's a possibility. And I'm going to parent it to the wrist, and I'm going to rename this one to hand underscore joint. Okay, and then I need to move this one out. So I'm going to switch to my translate tool, select my hand joint, and then making sure, I'm going to turn my mesh back on so I can see it. I'm going to put this out in my hand. And this is just a temporary joint. We're not concerned about exact placement on this one, but I'm going to place it about in line with those first knuckles. Okay. Now, we've got all those joints made. Turn off X-ray mode. Turn off the edges. Okay, now you can walk back up to my pelvis, and I need a duplicate joint right here at the hips. So I can have a lower spine joint that will move with the hips joint, but can also rotate at the exact same location as it. So I'm going to grab the hips joint and press Control D to duplicate it. I'm going to delete all of its children. And I'm going to rename this to torso base underscore joint. And I'm going to rework my hierarchy. I'm going to parent the torso base to the hips joint. Then I'm going to parent, and this again, this is a middle mouse click and drag. So I'm going to parent the torso mid to the torso base. And now I've got two joints that are exactly on top of each other. And the torso base is going to follow the hips joint, but it can move independently. Okay, so with the hips joint selected, I'm going to go ahead and move down the body this time. Turn back on my X-ray mode so I can better picture where I need the hip joint to be. Switch to my joint, back to my joint tool. And going to put the hip joint about right there. Looks good to me. Now again, I'm going to hold down Shift because I need these joints, like the arm, they need to be in a perfectly straight line. I'm going to view the edge flow of my geometry, so I make sure I place the knee where it needs to be. And the ankle, again, holding down Shift, about where it needs to be. Then I'm going to place the ball of the toe about where it needs to be. And that's a little too low, so we undo. Put it right there. Okay. Let me turn off my edges so we can see what's going on better. Okay. So let me switch views. This time I'm going to go to my side view. I'm going to turn on X-ray joints. Okay. Now, remember, to get my joints to work correctly with the IK, the inverse kinematics, I need to put a little bit of a bend in this knee, so that it's already bending in the direction I want it to when I create the inverse kinematics. But I don't want to move these child joints, in this case joint 2 or 3 and 4, I mean. So I'm going to press Insert so I can move just that joint, and I'm going to slide that forward just ever so slightly. Okay. Then I'm going to grab this joint 4. I'm going to switch back to my regular old move tool by pressing Insert again. The shortcut for that is just to hold down D. And I'm going to place this at the ball of the foot, which is about where your foot bends, which I'm going to say is about right there. Okay. Now, if I come to my perspective view, I'm going to see that this is not that's not where it should be. So before I do this, I'm going to go ahead and duplicate, before I rotate the hip to get this in line, I'm going to duplicate joint 4 and create a toe. Go back to this view and slide it out to the tip of the toe. Okay. Now I'm definitely not running down the center of my foot. So, turn on X-ray joints. And I need to rotate all this. It looks like, first of all, not really very centered on the ankle joint. So I'm going to move out the hip to get that more in the center of the mass. Then I'm going to rotate the hip so the foot joints are in line with the foot geometry. And again, I can increase the size of my manipulator to get better, more refined control. Okay, now I've got rotation on the hip joint, so I can't use these joints. I have to create a new set and use these as reference. So I'm going to go to Show, turn off polygons. I got some NURBS curves right there. I'm going to turn those off too, so they won't get in the way. Go back to my joint tool, and these are going to be a child of the hips joints. I select the hips, and then I hold down V and click on the hip, the knee, the ankle, the ball, and the toe. Okay, now I've got a new set of joints that are in the right location, and they will not have any rotations on them. Okay, so I can delete these ones and rename these. So I'm going to call this one hip underscore left underscore joint. Knee underscore left underscore joint. And ankle underscore left underscore joint. Ball underscore left underscore joint. And toe underscore left underscore joint. Okay. Now I've got all my joints created on one side that I'm going to need, but I need to put them over onto the other side. So to do that, all I have to do is select the deviating joint, in this case like the clavicle left, and then I can go to my joint menu, and there's this mirror joints tool. I'm going to go to the option box for it. I can tell it to search for underscore L underscore and replace that with underscore right, R underscore for right. I want to mirror across the YZ plane, and I know that because if I look at this cursor down here in the bottom left, the Y and the Z are stacked. I want the mirror function to be for behavior, and once I click that, I can click apply, and now I've created the other half. Okay, and they're even named correctly. Then I do the same thing for the hip, and this time I'll just click mirror so it'll close the window, and now I've got both sides created, and this is all of the joints that I'm going to need for the character at this point in time. Now obviously we're going to need some finger joints and some other stuff as well, and they would be created, all of those would be created just the same way I did these. Okay, so there's all the joints that I'm going to need. Now I forgot to double check my torso joints to make sure that they're really where they need to be. So let me go to my side view here, turn on X-ray mode. Looks like I need to move those back quite a bit. So got the hips about where I need them, but the torso base all needs to move back. And the problem is I've already got my clavicles positioned where they need to be. So I'm going to grab both the clavicles and middle mouse click it and drag them out into empty space. That will unparent them without moving them. Then I can grab my torso base and I can move it back where it needs to be. And I'm just going to pick walk down the chain and move these about where I think they need to be. And again, we only want to use translate when we're positioning these, if you can help it. Okay. That's no S-curve, but that's just the way she's designed. And again, I just tried to run those joints straight up the middle. Okay, now I can grab my left and right clavicles and drag and drop them on top of the shoulders joint, and they're back in the hierarchy and everything is all good. Okay. You always want to make a close inspection after you think you're done to make sure you really are done. Okay, I think that's good for this tutorial.